The fever burned through Alex Carter like wildfire. But it was the doctor's kiss that set his soul ablaze. He stumbled into the Seattle General ER at 2 a.m. Vision blurry, skin clammy, and a cough that felt like it was tearing his lungs apart. By the time he collapsed into a plastic chair, he was sure he'd die alone in this fluorescent hell until Dr. Elias Moreno walked in. The ER was chaos, a symphony of beeping monitors and hurried footsteps. Alex, 26, a barista with dreams bigger than his paycheck, wasn't supposed to be here. He'd ignored the cough for weeks, blaming it on late nights at the grind, the coffee shop where he slung espresso shots for hipsters and artists. But tonight, his body betrayed him, each breath a knife in his chest. He'd dragged himself to the hospital, half delirious, not expecting a doctor who looked like he'd stepped out of a movie tall, with deep brown eyes and a calm that seemed to hush the room. Mr. Carter. Elias's voice was steady, warm, cutting through Alex's haze. He was maybe 35, his white coat crisp, but his expression soft, like he saw more than just a patient. Let's get you sorted out. He guided Alex to a curtained bay, his hand brushing Alex's arm, a touch that lingered just a second too long. Alex's fevered brain barely registered it, but his heart did, stuttering in a way that had nothing to do with his illness. Elias ran through the routine thermometer, stethoscope, questions about symptoms. Alex mumbled answers, his voice hoarse. Just a cold. Probably. I don't have insurance. So, make it quick. Elias frowned, his gaze lingering on Alex's flushed face. You're not leaving until we figure this out, he said firmly. You're burning up. The diagnosis came fast, severe pneumonia. Alex's world tilted. Hospital stays weren't in his budget, and the thought of bills piling up made his stomach churn worse than the fever. I can't stay, he protested, trying to stand, but his legs buckled. Elias caught him, strong hands steadying him, and for a moment, their faces were inches apart. Alex's breath hitched, not just from the illness. You're staying, Elias said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I'll handle the paperwork. There was something in his eyes, concern. Yes, but also something deeper. Something Alex couldn't name in his fevered state. He was too sick to question it, too tired to fight. He let Elias guide him to a bed, the doctor's presence a strange anchor in the storm of his fear. Hours blurred into a haze of 4 drips and oxygen masks. Elias checked on him more than necessary. Alex noticed, even through his delirium, the doctor's visits weren't just clinical. There was a warmth in his questions, a softness in the way he adjusted Alex's pillow or checked his chart. By the second night, Alex's fever spiked to 104, and he was barely coherent, muttering about his estranged family, his dreams of being a writer, his fear of dying alone. Elias stayed by his side, longer than any shift required. It was 3 a.m. when it happened. The hospital was quiet, the lights dim. Alex, half conscious, felt Elias's hand on his forehead, checking his temperature the old-fashioned way. You're gonna be okay, Elias whispered, his voice thick with something Alex couldn't place. Then, without warning, Elias leaned down and pressed his lips to Alex's soft, brief, but electric. The kiss was a spark in the dark, gone as quickly as it came. Alex's eyes fluttered open, meeting Elias's, wide with shock at his own actions. I'm sorry, Elias stammered, stepping back, his face a mix of guilt and longing. I shouldn't have. You're my patient. He turned to leave, but Alex's weak hand caught his wrist. Don't go, Alex rasped, his voice barely audible. Please. Elias froze, torn between duty and desire. He stayed, sitting silently by Alex's bed until dawn, neither of them speaking of the kiss. But it hung between them, a fragile thread tying their fates together. Alex didn't know if it was the fever or the kiss, but he felt something shift inside him, a spark of hope, or maybe something more dangerous, As morning light filtered through the hospital blinds, Alex's fever began to break, but his heart was still racing. He didn't know Elias's story, didn't know why a doctor would risk everything for a fleeting moment with a stranger. But he knew one thing. That kiss wasn't just a mistake. It was a beginning. Alex woke to the sterile hum of the hospital. His fever dulled, but his mind replaying that kiss like a broken record. Elias was gone, replaced by a brisk nurse who checked his vitals with mechanical efficiency. He wanted to ask where the doctor was, but the words stuck in his throat. What do you say about a moment that shouldn't have happened but felt like it was meant to? By day 3, Alex was stable enough to notice the world again. The hospital room, with its beige walls and faint antiseptic smell, felt like a cage. He'd always hated feeling trapped by his small-town past, by his dead-end job, by the expectations of a world that didn't quite fit him. Growing up in rural Idaho, Alex had known he was different by age 12, when he'd catch himself staring too long at the quarterback instead of the cheerleaders. Coming out at 16 had earned him a one-way ticket to his aunt's couch in Seattle and a family that stopped calling. Now, at 26, he was used to being alone until Elias. The doctor reappeared that afternoon, his expression guarded. "You're improving," Elias said, checking Alex's chart without meeting his eyes. "We'll keep you one more day, then you can go home." His voice was professional, but Alex caught the slight tremor in it. He wanted to ask about the kiss, to demand answers, but Elias's stiff posture screamed distance. Instead, Alex nodded, swallowing his questions. Discharge came with a stack of papers and a warning to rest. Elias wasn't there when Alex left, and the absence stung more than he expected. Back in his tiny Capitol Hill apartment, Alex tried to return to normal brewing coffee, scribbling story ideas, dodging calls from his boss. But normal felt wrong. He kept seeing Elias's face, those warm brown eyes, the way his lips had felt for that fleeting second. He didn't even know the guy's last name. A week later, Alex was back at the grind, steaming milk and dodging questions about his absence. The coffee shop was a haven of mismatched furniture and local art, a place where Seattle's misfits gathered. Alex fit right in, with his tousled hair and thrift store aesthetic. But today his heart wasn't in it. He was wiping down the counter when the bell above the door chimed. And there was Elias, out of his white coat, in a navy sweater that hugged his frame. "Alex," Elias said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "I needed to see you." The shop was quiet, just a few regulars hunched over laptops. Alex froze, the rag in his hand forgotten. "Why?" he asked, sharper than he meant. Elias stepped closer, his eyes searching Alex's face. "I crossed a line. I owe you an apology, but I can't stop thinking about you." The words hit like a punch. Alex's pulse raced, torn between anger and something softer, something that scared him. "You kissed me while I was half dead," he said, keeping his voice low so the regulars wouldn't hear. "Then you ghosted me. What am I supposed to do with that?" Elias flinched, but he didn't back away. "I'm not out," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've spent my whole life hiding who I am. That night, it was the first time I didn't." Alex's anger softened, replaced by a pang of recognition. He knew what it was like to hide, to bury parts of yourself to survive. But he wasn't ready to let Elias off the hook. "So what now?" he asked. "You're here because you feel guilty, or because you want something?" Elias's jaw tightened, but his eyes were honest. "I don't know, but I know I had to see you again." They stood there, the counter between them, the air thick with unspoken words. Alex wanted to hate him, to write him off as a mistake, but his heart wouldn't let him. Instead, he did something reckless. "I get off at 6, he said. "If you're serious, meet me here." Elias nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes, and left without another word. That evening, they walked through Pike Place Market, the air sharp with the smell of fish and flowers. Elias opened up, slowly about growing up in a conservative Latino family in Texas, about medical school, about the fear of losing everything if he came out. Alex listened, sharing his own story of rejection and resilience. The city buzzed around them. But for the first time, Alex didn't feel alone. The weeks that followed were a blur of stolen moments. Alex and Elias met after shifts coffee at the grind. Late-night walks along the waterfront. Quiet dinners at hole-in-the-wall restaurants. Each meeting chipped away at the walls between them. Elias was cautious, always glancing over his shoulder. But with Alex, he was different, lighter, more himself. Alex, too, felt something shift. He'd always been guarded, quick to push people away. But Elias's quiet strength made him want to stay. One night, at a dimly lit jazz bar in Belltown, Elias reached for Alex's hand under the table. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental. "I've never done this," Elias admitted, his thumb brushing Alex's knuckles. "Not in public." Alex squeezed his hand, his heart swelling. "You're doing it now?" he said, a grin tugging at his lips. For a moment, the world was just them two men, falling into something neither had expected. But the world wasn't kind to secrets. At the hospital, Elias's colleagues began to notice his distractions. A nurse caught him smiling at his phone during a break, and whispers started. Elias brushed it off, but the pressure was mounting. His family, too, was a shadow over him. His mother called weekly, asking when he'd settled down with a nice girl. Coming out wasn't just personal for Elias. It was a seismic shift that could cost him everything. Alex, meanwhile, was wrestling with his own fears. He'd been burned before by lovers who left, by a family who turned their backs. Letting Elias in meant risking that pain again. But every time Elias laughed, or looked at him with those warm, unguarded eyes, Alex felt himself falling deeper. He started writing again, pouring his feelings into stories he hadn't touched in years. Elias was his muse, his anchor, his risk. One rainy evening, they ended up at Alex's apartment, soaked from a sudden downpour. They laughed as they peeled off wet jackets, the tension between them electric. Elias kissed him, slow and deliberate, nothing like the fevered moment in the hospital. This time, Alex kissed him back, his hands tangling in Elias's hair. They didn't speak, didn't need to. The world outside could wait. But reality crept in. Elias's phone buzzed with a hospital page, pulling him back to his world of pagers and patients. As he left, he promised to call, but Alex saw the worry in his eyes. The next day, Elias was distant, citing a double shift. Alex tried not to overthink it, but doubt gnawed at him. Was this too much for Elias? Was he pulling away? A week later, Alex got his answer. Elias showed up at the grind, his face pale. "My supervisor knows," he said, his voice tight. "Someone saw us at the jazz bar. They're asking questions." Alex's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" he asked. Elias shook his head. "I don't know yet, but I need time to figure it out." Alex wanted to fight, to tell Elias to stand up for them. But he saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear Alex had felt coming out all those years ago. He nodded, his throat tight. "Take your time," he said. But inside, he was terrified. What if time meant goodbye? Time stretched like a taut wire. Elias's texts grew sporadic, his excuses piling up extra shifts. Family calls, hospital politics. Alex tried to be patient, but each unanswered message felt like a crack in his heart. He threw himself into work, into writing, but the words felt hollow without Elias's voice in his ear. The grind was no longer a haven. It was a reminder of the man who'd walked through its doors and changed everything. One night, unable to sleep, Alex wandered to Gasworks Park. The city skyline glittered across the water, but all he could think about was Elias. He'd fallen hard, harder than he'd ever thought possible. But love, he realized, wasn't enough when the world stood in the way. He wondered if Elias was fighting for them, or if he'd already let go. Elias, meanwhile, was drowning. The hospital's gossip mill churned, and his supervisor had called him in for a talk. It wasn't explicit, no one said gay outright, but the questions about his personal life were pointed. Elias deflected, but the pressure was suffocating. At home, his mother's calls grew more insistent. Her talk of grandchildren, a knife in his gut. He wanted to tell her about Alex, to tell the world, but fear held him back. He'd worked too hard for his career, his reputation. Could he risk it all for a man he'd known for weeks? Yet Alex was more than a fling. Elias saw it in the way Alex laughed, in the stories he wrote, in the way he made Elias feel alive for the first time in years. He'd spent his life in the closet, dating women to keep up appearances. But Alex had cracked that facade wide open. The kiss in the hospital hadn't been a mistake, it had been the truest thing he'd ever done. He found Alex at the grind a week later, the shop nearly empty. "I'm sorry," Elias said, his voice raw. "I've been a coward." Alex looked at him, wary but hopeful. "What's changed?" he asked. Elias took a deep breath. "I told my supervisor I'm seeing someone. I didn't say who. But I'm tired of hiding." Alex's eyes widened, a mix of pride and fear. "What happens now?" he asked. "I don't know," Elias admitted. "But I want to find out. With you." They didn't kiss, didn't touch, but the air between them hummed with possibility. For the first time, Elias felt like he was choosing himself. The next month was a tightrope walk. Elias was more open at work, deflecting questions with vague answers, but no longer denying who he was. The hospital didn't fire him, his record was too strong, but the whispers followed him. Alex, meanwhile, was navigating his own battles. His boss at the grind was cutting hours, and his writing wasn't paying the bills. He wondered if he was enough for Elias, if their fledgling relationship could survive the pressure. They found solace in small moments, cooking dinner in Alex's cramped kitchen, watching old movies, stealing kisses in the rain. But the world kept pushing. Elias's mother visited, and he didn't tell her about Alex. The omission hurt, but Alex understood. Coming out wasn't a single moment. It was a series of battles, each one harder than the last. One night, at a gallery opening in Pioneer Square, everything changed. Alex had been invited by a friend whose art was on display, and he'd convinced Elias to come. The crowd was eclectic: artists, musicians, tech bros, but Elias was nervous, hyper-aware of eyes on them. When Alex slipped his hand into Elias's, he felt the doctor tense. "Relax," Alex whispered. "It's just us." Elias nodded, but his grip was tight. Then they ran into Dr. Rachel Kim, Elias's colleague. She smiled, but her eyes lingered on their joined hands. "Didn't expect to see you here, Moreno," she said, her tone neutral but probing. Elias froze, his hand slipping from Alex's. The rejection stung, and Alex pulled away, his face hot. "I need some air," he muttered, heading for the door. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflective. Elias followed, his voice desperate. "Alex, wait." I panicked. "I'm sorry." Alex turned, his eyes blazing. "I can't keep being your secret, Elias. I've done that before. It breaks you." Elias stepped closer, his face anguished. "I'm trying. I've never done this before. I don't want to lose you." Alex wanted to stay angry, but he saw the truth in Elias's eyes. "Then stop running," he said. "Choose us." Elias nodded, tears mixing with the damp air. He pulled Alex into a kiss, right there on the street, not caring who saw. It was a promise, fragile but real. The kiss on the street was a turning point, but not an ending. Elias started coming out, slowly, to his closest friends, then his sister. Each conversation was a weight lifted, but also a risk. His mother was still in the dark, and the hospital's politics were a minefield. Alex, too, was grappling with his own fears about money, about his future, about whether he could trust Elias not to break his heart. They fought sometimes, over small things like missed calls or bigger things like Elias's hesitation to tell his mother. But they always came back to each other, drawn by a connection neither could deny. Alex's writing flourished, his stories now filled with the raw emotion of their relationship. Elias read every draft, his feedback gentle but honest. "You're going to be something," he told Alex one night, his voice full of pride. One evening, Elias invited Alex to a hospital fundraiser, a glitzy event at a downtown hotel. It was a bold move, bringing Alex meant outing himself to his colleagues. Alex was nervous, but he dressed up, his thrift store blazer a stark contrast to Elias's tailored suit. They walked in together, hand in hand, and the room noticed. Whispers followed, but Elias didn't flinch. He introduced Alex as his partner, his voice steady. For Alex, it was a moment of triumph, but also fear. What would this cost Elias? The night went well, but the fallout came later. A senior doctor pulled Elias aside, warning him about professionalism. Elias held his ground, but the stress was visible. Alex felt guilty, wondering if he was pushing Elias too far, too fast. But Elias was resolute. "I'm done hiding," he said. "You're worth it." Then came the call from Elias's mother. She'd heard rumors, demanded answers. Elias told her the truth, his voice shaking as he spoke. The call ended in tears, hers, his, but also a promise to talk again. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was a start. A year after that fevered night in the hospital, Alex and Elias stood together at Gasworks Park, the same place Alex had gone to wrestle with his doubts. The skyline sparkled, the air crisp with autumn. They'd been through hell, hospital gossip, family tensions, Alex's financial struggles, but they'd come out stronger. Elias was fully out now, his mother slowly coming around, his career intact but changed. He'd started volunteering at a clinic for underserved communities, inspired by Alex's stories of resilience. Alex, too, had grown. His writing had caught the eye of a local publisher, and his first short story collection was in the works. He'd dedicated it to Elias, the man who'd kissed him when he was at his lowest and given him a reason to fight. They weren't perfect fights, still flared. Doubts still crept in, but they were real. And that was enough. As they stood by the water, Elias took Alex's hand. "I never thanked you," he said, his voice soft. "For what?" Alex asked, raising an eyebrow. "For making me brave," Elias replied. He pulled Alex close, kissing him under the stars, the city a witness to their love. It wasn't the fever that had changed Alex's life, or even the kiss that started it all. It was the courage they'd found in each other, the strength to be themselves in a world that wasn't always kind. The night stretched on, full of quiet promises. They'd face more challenges. Life always had more to throw, but they'd face them together. And that, Alex realized, was the truest kind of recovery.